Welcome to Focus on the 90s, a forum on the economy sponsored by the Berkshire Eagle and Channel 20 with technical assistance from the Elder Services of Berkshire County. My name's Lou Cuyler, and I'm the business editor for the Berkshire Eagle. We've gathered some panelists here today. We're all on the threshold of the 90s. We know that. That's no secret. But we are all concerned about what's ahead, and I think this concern has been particularly manifest in the last 6 months as we've seen discouraging signs in the Berkshire economy. So there's no question about the concerns. Every panelist here has worked in the trenches for a long time in various ways to alleviate those concerns. And we've invited them here today so that they can address themselves to some of the broader questions facing the Berkshires, and particularly where we're headed and where we may end up at the end of the decade. All of the people who I will introduce really wear 2 or 3 hats. They've been active enough so that they have worked in various economic sectors. Now, I'm going to ask a question. Each person will be given approximately 2 minutes to respond. We'll go right around the table, and then we'll open it up for general discussion. The lead-off batter in this forum is going to be Bob Wells, who's the president of the Berkshire County Savings Bank. And the question to Bob is, and indeed to all the panelists, Bob, assuming that Berkshire County wants to get into a much more diversified economy by the mid-1990s with a balance between manufacturing and sector service jobs, then do you think we're on the right track to achieve those goals, or is there something else we should be doing?
Lou, I think that the Berkshires, we should make straightforward here now, has a great deal to offer. A tremendous amount that we have here to offer both the service community and the business community from the standpoint of manufacturing. Business recruitment, manufacturing recruitment has been very much a part of the 1980s, and it will have to continue to be a major part of the plan for the 1990s. Tourism and the second home market will continue to expand, even though we are in a real estate slump at the present time. The Berkshires were mentioned in an article recently as being one of the unfound jewels in the United States. And I think that's very important for us to realize as we approach. Even though the difficult times are here, the economy has its problems, but we have a great deal to offer. I think one of the biggest issues in Berkshire County is going to be the bypass issue. We are going to have to balance between scenery and industrial development. And the bypass, even though it will affect some of the scenery, it will help us in providing a better Berkshire County in the next century.
Thank you very much. And the next person who'll have the opportunity to answer is Diane Jackman. Diane is the executive director of the newly constituted Berkshire Regional Employment Board, an agency that has jurisdiction over training programs. Diane?
Thank you. I think we're out of the starting gate. I think that we are beginning to understand what the challenges are, and best of all, groups like the Regional Employment Board are beginning to say we need to have a coalition of a lot of different people talking about the same things, because we have a lot in common. We have a lot of common concerns. We've started to build that coalition in terms of getting business sector together, employees, trying to get educators involved with partnerships, making sure that community-based organizations are also involved. We've become believers. We understand that to have a good balance, We need to cross over in terms of having proper kinds of training and retraining available for people in Berkshire County. We do not want to lose people. We don't want to lose the migration of young people. We need to change the fundamental skills that people are learning and give them incentives to stay with it in school. We also need to work very, very hard to make sure that people who are laid off have better matches to their skills in terms of retraining for what is going to be available in the future. Regional Employment Board is working to make sure that those resources that we do have, as they get skinnier and skinnier, get more focused and more selective. We are working to ensure that monies that are spent on employment and training in Berkshire County are focused on the needs for the 90s.
Thank you, Diane. And the next panelist is Gary Lopenzina. Gary is president of Gowdy-Shandoff, an office supply and design firm in Pittsfield. He's also chairman of the office recruitment committee for Pittsfield Central, the downtown organization. And in his previous life, he was publisher of the American City magazine. Gary?
This is my second life. I think Diane put her finger on a very important thing, and that's we've got the group infrastructure in place in Berkshire County, and I think that's critical. You've got to have all your infrastructure kinds of things in place, and that's important. But there are some other things that I think if we don't do well and we don't concentrate on very heavily, I think we're going to have problems as we go along. And specifically, I talk about the need to be competitive in the arena of economic development. Pittsfield has some wonderful things. Berkshire County has some wonderful things. I think we're all in agreement. We all go around telling each other what a great place we have to live in. And I'm not going to argue that point. I think it's a wonderful place. I chose to be here. I wasn't born here. I chose to be here. And I'm going to stay here. But you have to be competitive. You have to be competitive for jobs. You have to be competitive for people. You have to be competitive in your school system. Your downtown has to be competitive. And your ability to attract businesses has to be competitive. And frankly, this community, this county, is not competitive. And until the legislature and the municipal officials face up to the fact that if we're going to succeed, and we can succeed, and we will succeed, then they must work with us very closely to develop a competitive stature in this community that allows us to compete against Gloversville, New York, against New Haven in Connecticut, and against any other community in any other state that makes us able to bring in business, bring in industry, and create the balance that you're talking about. That has to happen. If you're not competitive, you don't compete. That's the nature of things. That's the way it is.
Thank you, Gary. I think you touched on something that's really important for all of us to think about. Judy Salsbury is the next respondent. Judy is a principal in Salsbury Ziglar. She has been involved in the publicity and promotion for Berkshire County for many years. She's speaking from her own point of view rather than the promotional agency that is her major client. Judy?
Yes. I'd like to respond to both what Gary and Diane said. I agree we have to be competitive, but I think we have to be competitive not within the county, which is what I see a lot of, North County competing against South County, one town competing against another. We need to work together cooperatively in the county. As far as that works, as far as tourism is concerned, my goal is to get the people to come to the Berkshires. If they arrive in Great Barrington, they will find out about the Clark Art Institute and go to Williamstown. But if we don't work cooperatively together, it's just not going to work. We have to work together on this to stop businesses from going out of state, tourists going to New York State, which spends an enormous amount of money to attract them there. Obviously, we're not going to be able to rely on state funds the way we had in the past. So I think we have to start thinking in terms of pooling our resources. And as far as the tourism sector is concerned, that means working together as providers for the visitors and buying larger space ads in very well read but very expensive publications to get large Berkshire space, not individual space, Berkshire space, to work together for the off-season, to fill those empty rooms, to make everybody happy. But on the larger scale, tourism affects here the quality of life. If we didn't have all the cultural attractions and the recreational skiing, golf, and all those things, we wouldn't be nearly as attractive to the businesses and industries coming here. But the tourists provide the basic infrastructure, if you like, income for those recreational and cultural attractions. So we need very badly to recognize that the tourist dollar is a clean dollar, that it comes in here, and support tourism and support those organizations which do provide a quality of life. And then when you go over, if I can just go on for one more minute, because this is I think, a very serious issue, and that is the business of middle and lower income housing. We have an enormous number of people in the service sector. They don't earn a lot of money. It's not nearly as well paid as in the business and engineering sectors. But they need to live here and work here and provide services for our visitors. If they cannot find a place to live, let alone a place to buy, but a place to rent, they won't want to be here. We will have too few people working, and then when the visitors come and there isn't good service, they won't want to come back. So everything works together. We all have to work on these things, and I'd like to see more construction for lower and middle income, not necessarily construction, but conversion maybe, when they talk about building huge, one big school to turn the old schools into apartments like they have in Pittsfield in some cases. But I do think we need cooperation above and beyond everything else.
Well, I think, again, you've hit on a common concern of all of us. The next responder will be Ed Perlak. Ed is the assistant administrator for Hillcrest Hospital. So he's in the health sector of the service sector economy, one that's growing very rapidly. Additionally, Ed was on the now defunct but Western Massachusetts Health Planning Council, which was an overview agency for health services. Ed?
Thank you, Lou. Approximately 1 out of every 9 jobs in Berkshire County is in the health service sector. Now, that's a substantial amount. And over the last 5 or 6 years, we had an increase of about 12.5% in that workforce. The problem that we see, though, is that that increase has primarily been in the lower cost paying jobs. Now, there is a need for higher skilled personnel, but those number of jobs in the aggregate is going to be decreasing, because if you were to look at the trends, you see that the number of personnel working in hospitals and skilled positions has basically decreased. We do have a need for highly trained technical personnel. We have a need for highly trained professional people. The problem, though, is that most of these people need to be locally educated, and we're directly dependent upon our local support systems, our local educational support systems, our local institutions of higher learning. Because what we find is that when you have young people who are skilled and motivated to go into health professions and they go to other areas, they stay there, and that's a problem. So we're very dependent as a healthcare sector on our local people. The growth in healthcare, though, is a double-edged sword, I believe, because healthcare is a basic support service, and the cost of those services are borne directly by the local people, whether through out-of-pocket expenses, insurance, or through your taxes, through governmental payers. So as you have a tendency to increase your healthcare support system, your costs are going to be increasing, and that may not make this area as attractive for outside people to come in, because you're more dependent upon generating costs to support these higher paying positions. So what we need to do is we really need to look at a balance between growth in this sector and actually what it's going to cost.
Thank you, Ed. The next respondent will be Arlen Schiff. Arlen is Director of Community Development in North Adams, a community that is undergoing a terrific transformation between manufacturing and service. Arlene?
I'd have to respond to your question maybe by saying both yes and no. I'd say yes in that Northern Berkshire County several years ago formed a regional agency which focuses its energy on encouraging businesses to expand and come to Northern Berkshire. And this is a one-stop agency. So a business comes to the Northern Berkshire Industrial Park and Development Corporation and says where in Northern Berkshire County is the best place for me to locate. And they don't have to go to North Adams, Williamstown, Cheshire, and individually research the labor force and available space. At the same time, Northern Berkshire County has been focusing on two major tourism projects, these being the Heritage Greylock Four-Season Resort and the Mass Smoker Museum project, both of which will increase tourism and provide service sector employment, ranging from professional and managerial employment to other service occupations. However, there's much more to be done, and one of the major things I think we need to do is to encourage our young people to stay in school and to provide them with a positive outlook that there are jobs in the area which they will be able to move into if they stay in school rather than moving on to other parts of the country or just dropping out because they can get a job at McDonald's now rather than waiting to graduate. So I think we really need to work on linking businesses with the children even when they're younger, maybe through internships or other career opportunity sort of relationships. And I agree with Judy in that we need to expand the affordable housing. Again, young people will leave the county and not fill these jobs if they don't see the opportunity for them to have their American dream here. And you will not get new businesses coming in if, again, they have to relocate employees who are used to owning homes in other parts of the country. I also just want to say that I think this is something that we're going to have to continually work at. We're never going to get to the balance and then be able to wash our hands of it, but it's something that we'll have to continuously make an effort to meet that balance and maintain that balance.
Thank you, Arlene. I think that we really all agree that you never quite arrive at this ideal. The next respondent will be Tom Dellert. Tom is the general manager for Polymatrix. He also has been very active as president of the Associated Plastics Industries for Berkshire County, as well as in the Central Berkshire Chamber of Commerce, and he's taken a lead role in the last year or so of forging the link between businesses and schools. Tom?
Thank you, Lou. I think that as we look into the past, okay, we can see where we've made some mistakes in the way we've proceeded forward. I think that today we have to look into the future. I think that our planning has to be in two kinds of focuses. One, in short-range planning, those things which can help us right away, and two, in those things which are going to help us in the future. I think that manufacturing today needs to re-evaluate its situation and expand and broaden its base. That's existing manufacturing. At the same time, I think we need to look at bringing in new manufacturing into the area that will broaden that base in the areas that we have our best strengths. I think evaluating our strengths is very important, and I think that our strengths in manufacturing are very clear. I think that we have a very strong paper industry, a very strong metal industry, and obviously a very strong plastics industry in Pittsfield and in Berkshire County. Those areas need to be expanded on first. I think we need to look to those strengths, okay, to save our time and effort in the near future. In the long-range planning, I think we need to look at technology and where technology is going. I think to expand our existing technical park using the existing strengths is very fine. But I think we also need to look to the outside where business is growing and draw that business here to Pittsfield and Berkshire County. As far as education is concerned, education is something that we all need to work toward. Okay, it's something that is needed here in Pittsfield. I think that education is the format in which we all are going to improve our businesses. We all draw our labor force from existing educational sources, whether that be BCC, or whether that be from the high school vocational educational sector or the academic side. We certainly need to show our young people exactly where manufacturing jobs come from and go to as they expand their horizons and look to the future. I think looking at our weaknesses, okay, we certainly have those weaknesses and we need to recognize them because they affect all of us. Transportation in the city needs to be improved. Okay, that transportation needs to be improved so that we can attract businesses here and so that we can reach to our customers, and the vendors can bring product to Pittsfield more reasonably. Without having a bypass or a turnpike network, we certainly are at a disadvantage over other parts of the Commonwealth. Exposure to what's happening in technology will help us to expand our educational format for the future, not only in polytechnical type education, but also at BCC. I feel that the out-migration of our young people, okay, comes from them not understanding what's available for them in Berkshire County, and we need to explore that, and we need to work at that. Retaining our existing workforce so that when problems arise from employees needing new kinds of training, whether they're existing businesses or whether they're from layoffs or changes in the workforce, they need to have a way of getting retrained. Technology is changing so dramatically that technology of 4 years ago is now obsolete. We need to stay current with technology training, and we need to do it on an ongoing basis.
Tom, thank you very much. I think your observations are obviously very astute. The next responder will be John Mooney on my right. John is a great Barrington Selectman. He's a columnist. He is a communications strategist by profession and all-around curmudgeon. John.
Well, thank you, Lou. I'm afraid I'm going to have to be a little curmudgeonly again today, because I feel that the basic question that we have to answer today, is the county on track toward achieving a balanced economy, has to be answered no. That we're not doing the right things, that we may be putting too much emphasis on tourism. And when we talk about attracting manufacturing, we may be putting too much emphasis on traditional manufacturing. And I'm wondering if the quest for traditional manufacturing in Berkshire County might not be a wild goose chase. I think that what we're looking at here, not only in Berkshire County, but in the nation as a whole, is that that manufacturing is going to become non-traditional. In fact, it's not even going to become manufacturing. I think tomorrow's so-called manufacturing is going to be computer services, magazine publishing, insurance companies, software development, advertising, consulting, whatever. And if that's what we're going to need to attract, then I think that we in our Chamber of Commerce's here in Berkshire County have failed horribly. Some years ago, I was an assistant city editor of a newspaper in High Point, North Carolina. And while I was there, I watched High Point Steel, Grand Rapids, Michigan. And the way it was done, when we all grew up, we learned that Grand Rapids, Michigan was the furniture capital of the world. High Point, North Carolina is now. And it happened while I was down there. And what happened was that the High Point Chamber of Commerce sent emissaries up to Grand Rapids and persuaded these individual companies to open just branch offices down there, try it out. Well, they did, and the branch offices grew and grew, and the first thing we knew, Grand Rapids was living in High Point. I think we're going to have to do something akin to that in Berkshire County, and stop sitting around up here and talking to ourselves and putting all of our developmental efforts into trying to cultivate more and more tourism. I think if we're going to have a balanced economy, our organizations here in the county charged with the responsibility of developing the county are going to have to do exactly that. Send delegations out elsewhere, persuade people to come here, even if it's to open a branch office, and through that, cultivate some sort of a balanced economy in Berkshire County. I don't think we have a balanced economy right now, and I think it's getting more unbalanced day by day.
John, thank you very much. You really are expressing megatrends, which is the title of a book that is just coming out in a new version. The final responder is Fred Shogry on my left. Fred is the president of IUE Local 254 at GE, the white-collar union. Fred has been in the trenches of labor management issues for probably more years than he wishes to remember. Fred?
Thank you, Lou. It's been a few years, but they have been rewarding to me as far as myself and our union representing people in General Electric Company. Bob Wells, you hit it on the nose and you said that we need a bypass. I'm a firm believer of it. Without the roads, the rest of the community cannot survive, and I commend you for taking that stance today. Taking some stances in my life, a lot of them unpopular, has probably put me where I am today. I don't know if that's a good situation, but I'll stand up behind it. You're going to hear new words in the 90s of globalization, joint ventures, mergers, which is going to affect this community as well as the rest of the manufacturing jobs throughout the country. Big corporations are looking at a lot of factors in where they relocate their particular jobs. One of the biggest issues in Berkshire County is going to be health costs in our up-and-coming negotiations with General Electric Company. We have started at the national level, and I feel fortunate to be, and I'm proud to be, one of the 13 representatives from IUE that represent all the GE workers throughout the country. So health costs is one of the #1 concerns that I have. I am a little sad that in the past decade that every time we had a layoff at General Electric Company or any other major corporation in Berkshire County, we had an economic forecaster that played it down that said that no problem, we're going to pick up the slack and we haven't been hurt. Either he wasn't on track or he put a lot of people to sleep, and that hurt. You can't replace these high-paying jobs by not counting the people who are through collecting unemployment. Evidently, they're not unemployed anymore, and I don't believe in that, and I wish the government and the state would take notice of this. When we have a notification of 1,000 jobs being laid off in General Electric Company, that trickles down to about 4,000 or 5,000 people getting hurt in their paycheck. It's going to be devastating to this community as far as the state crisis that we're in now, the real estate market, health costs, all these things. You add them up, and we're in for some rough time. I do go for a service community jobs as an equal mix with manufacturing jobs, but not to the extent where it'll make Pittsfield a Cape Cod. You need jobs. When you do that, you have the elderly population, and there's nothing wrong with that. I hope to get there pretty soon. We cannot subsidize a total elderly community and second home venture here in Berkshire County. We need sources, and we need resources, we need new jobs, and we better get off our duffs today. And Lou, I want to commend you for starting this, and I hope it'll take some effect for this community. Thank you.
Fred, thank you. And now we're going to open it up for discussion, and let me just try to touch on a couple of things that were said, and then I'm going to ask everybody to pitch in and respond. I think there's general agreement on the goals. John, I think, said some good things which could point us in the right direction. We should be looking at new kinds of industry. What strikes me, anyway, as a problem in Berkshire County is that we're still divided into separate sections. It's almost as if the county were 3 countries, and there's no collective vision about where the county needs to go. Gary Lopenzina said this county has to be competitive. How can you be competitive if you're forever dividing up and choosing sides over a bypass issue, a Mass MoCA issue, a Mount Greylock issue, or what have you? I think the original question was, are we on track? And I'd like to ask the question of whether this county indeed can achieve a vision so that it can stay on track and achieve that balance. Anybody want to respond to that?
Who should provide the vision?
That's a good question. Who should? The mayor of Pittsfield, the Berkshire Eagle, the Transcript, the Advocate, Gary Lopenzina? Where does the vision for a community come from, Tom?
I think the vision for the community comes from the community. I think that the community has to be focused, and I think that the community has to start thinking together toward what the changes are that they need. I think that one of the things that happens, Lou, is that working together has not been one of our strong points in the past, and if we're to move ahead in the future, I think we all need to work together. I don't think anybody disagrees that we need a better transportation system, The key to that transportation system is not to fight over the turf of where that transportation system, but that we do need it, and we need to work together toward getting it, regardless of where it is. I think that in order to expand the marketplace, expand the business sector, expand the community, okay, we need to stop thinking about our own particular problems and think about what's good for the whole community. And I think that's the focus is going to come from the community, and the community has to recognize that in order to survive the future, they're going to have to work together.
The question there comes, though, what is the community and who expresses the views of the community? We have a community that ranges from North Adams on the north to Williamstown right next door, down to Great Barrington and Sheffield and Alfred. I think that we have an institution here in the county that should be providing the vision, and that's the Berkshire County Regional Planning Commission. And I think that we have got to approach our development over the 90s, if you will, Lou, through a regional approach, and I think that it is indeed the Regional Planning Commission that really should be up there taking the lead.
Well, John, that brings up another point. The Regional Planning Commission, as an agency, does represent the entire county. So does the County Commission, for that matter.
Not for much longer, I don't think.
The Regional Planning Commission, it was established in the late 60s. It's advisory in nature. The reason it's advisory in nature, as I recall that time, is that nobody wanted to give it any power. Nobody wanted to yield their turf to a Regional Planning Commission. And I think this is probably one of the problems in Berkshire County. It's full of Yankees. The Yankees don't want to concede their turf. Now, do you think that there could be any kind of an agreement between the communities to yield to a planning commission, or, and I think the issue is going to be before us in the next couple of years with land use?
Oh, I think that I think there will be an agreement to yield to land use, but let's differentiate between the Planning Commission's role, say, in regulation, when you talk about a land use commission, and its role in planning. I think the Planning Commission has been doing some regional planning. I think there's room to do a lot more of that in the 90s, and I don't think that any community is going to complain about that. I think that if the Regional Planning Commission were to stand up there in the 90s and provide the vision, as the phrase was used, I don't think anybody's going to complain about that. As far as the Land Use Commission goes, that's going to take some real development. But I think again that's necessary, because if we don't take a regional approach to protection of regional resources such as aquifers, for example, they're not going to get protected.
How do the rest of you feel about this idea of a regional agency that could express some vision? The Planning Commission is certainly one of the logical agencies, but it has been advisory in nature, and it's been accepted as such.
I don't think that's going to change.
How come?
I see no quick solution to that. The basic, you get to the elements that Tom brought out. He listed them all very neatly. But you have to go to the base of all the elements. The base of all the elements is that we need jobs. You should know that better than anybody else. GE is not going to provide those jobs anymore. Whether we like it or not, they're not going to provide those jobs. The question then becomes, how do you get the jobs? To get the jobs, you have to have one, community. It stems with community, a knowledgeable community who's aware of the realities. Who provides the awareness? Your governmental leaders should provide that awareness. They've got to make the public know. They have to let Berkshire County residents understand what it's all about. Don't tell me how beautiful it is here and how nice it is to live here. I know that. You all know that. It's a great place. There's a lot of great places in the United States, frankly. We need to have our legislative representatives, not the planning commission. We have legislators. That's what their job is. That's what their job is. They're supposed to be here looking at our situation and putting a very specific agenda together, working with municipal officials, with business officials, with labor officials, to put together the public agenda as to how are we going to be competitive for jobs. That's what it's all about. When you solve that problem, then you're going to begin to solve other problems very slowly. There's no quick fix. I know we need the infrastructure. I know that we have, that 1 out of 9 jobs in Berkshire County are health-related. That's an interesting figure. How are you going to support that if it keeps going that way? Reality is that it's your public elected officials, especially at the state level, who have the weapons, who have the capability. And, the funny thing is, we all get to know each other too well in small communities. If they see me walking up the street, they're going to run around the corner to get away from me. Get away from this guy. He's got a problem. Keep moving. I understand that, and I appreciate it. But, we like each other too much. So we don't like to ask hard questions of each other. We don't want to put anybody on the spot. I didn't run for office. I'm not going to run for office, but somebody did around here. Somebody ran for office. Somebody said, I'm going to be responsible. We need a public agenda. It starts with elected officials. They have to put it on the table. They've got to bring it to the public through forums like this, and they got to face reality and say, hey, we got to put everything on the line, let's get it done. Now, as soon as I say that, the first thing the guys at the chamber will say to me is, yeah, well, they won't do that, and let's be realistic. Well, I guess we have a different vision of reality. Reality is facing up to responsibility, and responsibility begins with public officials facing their responsibilities directly with us, and that's where I think it begins.
Ed.
I think when you talk about how to access public officials, you have to look at a way to really get their attention. Mm-hmm. And we participate in a consumer coalition on healthcare in Berkshire County. And that's been very effective as far as bringing people together. They've brought together a lot of business people through networking and contacts to be able to discuss the problems, to at least form a group to be able to get someone's attention on these particular issues. Because what Fred was talking about as far as healthcare costs is a very real issue for us right now. Because when you look at it, we have an aging population, in addition to all the other things that are going on, that's consuming a phenomenal amount of our healthcare resources. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got a young population, an indigent population, where there's a very high teenage birth rate, you've got a high infant mortality rate, and you've got an awful lot of other problems in that sector also. Now, why those groups are significant is because they consume a phenomenal amount of our healthcare resources. And secondly, they're paid for by governmental payers, who pay basically 70 cents on a dollar. Now, that difference is made up basically by business and industry and by the public who are paying out of pocket. So that's a very basic issue. And when we talk about healthcare costs and healthcare benefits, it really is a struggle as to how to send that message to the appropriate people. One of the ways we have participated in a healthcare coalition, and it's groups like that that are going to be able to hopefully set an agenda. But as I say, the issue that we have as far as controlling those healthcare costs is very simply how to make them affordable to the people who are paying the bills. And as I said, from a perspective of achieving a balance, we're going to be in very, very deep trouble, because if 1 out of every 9 of our jobs is healthcare related, and it could even go to 1 out of 8, then that's a substantial piece that a business and industry has to support, and that's a real issue. Because tourism and those related jobs aren't going to pay that bill because there aren't the healthcare benefits for them.
What Gary has touched on, I just want to bring it out a little bit more as far as being competitive. What we're going through right now is we're not only competitive with competitors, we have to be competitive with other General Electric plants, and we call that consolidation over there. So we're seeing a different type of competition. We have to be competitive with Mexico, with Puerto Rico. We're the environment issues aren't a big factor as far as manufacturer are concerned. We cannot do that here, Gary. I'm sorry. We can't be that competitive as you're talking about. My goal in the next few years is to hold on to as many jobs as we have in General Electric Company, knowing that there's no new ones coming, on a kind of one, the defense budget, on a kind of two, consolidation within aerospace and General Electric Company, on a kind of three, that I know they're getting out of the transformer business for good in Pittsfield, and they're not going to bring any new business in those particular buildings for reasons that I think everybody knows about. I'm not going to elaborate. So our competition, Gary, is strung out so far and so complex it's unbelievable. What we can do here, other than try to maintain what we have right now, would be particularly to try to tell new businesses our health cost isn't going to soar. Try to tell them that we are in a cooperative move and our labor force isn't looking to walk the street and picket against these people and strike and cause a disruptive attitude, as it has been in the past, which we had the luxury of doing because we had 11,000 people over there. We're talking now under half of that. So our goal is not to irritate Fairfield. Our goal is a mode of cooperation now that this community's never seen nothing like it. We're here to maintain what we have and then try to induce or bring in any other new industry that we can possibly, by any means we can. But as far as the state legislature, they got a problem with a budget right now. Everything's political. When you get elected for office, and the office I'm in, I'm elected, it's a non-paid job that I'm in. I don't make any money being the president of a union. But it's a job that I enjoy and I like doing. It's helping people. And everybody here, if we didn't have that same purpose, we wouldn't be here today. We're trying to get this community a little better than it has been in the last 10 or 20 years. Working together, we can do it. As far as putting a finger on who's going to head this up and who's going to lead it, and who do we go to, Tom, as far as who's going to head this up and who's going to grab this horse and who's going to grab the reins and steer this horse, I figure it's a carriage ride right now. And you can't hand the reins to people because of their inefficiencies in the past. We've got to maybe come up with a new idea of saying, someone take the bull by the horn, belly up to the bar, and lead this county where it can go, and that is on a better path than it's been. And maybe I don't think we're at a loss of lack of commissions here in this city. There are too many duplication of services happening in the job training field right now in Pittsfield. People should pool their resources together, work in one direction, okay, whether it be the county, northern Berkshire, southern Berkshire. I don't go for dividing the lines. This is a community. If we're going to train people like Diane says, I want them trained for Berkshire County. I love the rest of this country, but I don't feel we should put our dollars into training here and shipping people down to Florida or shipping them to California after we train them with our resources. Let's train them, and it's going to take someone with vision to find out what jobs are going to be had in this community in the future. So we put our dollars exactly where the children of that we have brought up to keep them in this community are going to stay here.
Let me ask Diane to respond to that, because a lot of what Fred is talking about is Diane's responsibility.
I think Fred's right on target. We don't want to lose people. We aren't going to be competitive, as Gary says, unless we have a workforce that's a quality workforce here and that's a versatile workforce. I think in the past we've been able to capture pockets of talented people, and they've been able to continue to do certain kinds of jobs. Now that we're getting shifted around and the structure of occupations in Berkshire County is changing dramatically, we've got to change that pool of people to be responsive to those needs. And that means they have to have better skills. They have to have better fundamental skills. They have to be better at problem solving. They have to be better in terms of flexibility, in terms of where they see themselves going, too. I disagree that we are duplicating efforts. I think if duplications exist now, particularly in terms of public funding for employment and training, they aren't going to be there long, folks. Because as we approach the funding for fiscal year 1991 and 92, the Regional Employment Board is saying, you're not going to get money unless you're cooperating and you're coordinating and you've built partnerships and you're on target with what the needs are in Berkshire County. We've done a pretty good job of assessing what those barriers are in the county in terms of what people need to be employed in the future. And I am so supportive of what Fred says in terms of making sure that the employees that we have here now, the ones who are unemployed, the potential losses of jobs, those people who are in our high schools and coming up through the grade schools, get the proper training. And I think that's what the Regional Employment Board, which is a county-wide representation of employers, of labor, of education, and community-based organizations are saying, hey, we're willing to work together and we want to make sure the resources are on target.
Judy.
Well, I agree with Diane, and I would like to respond to something John said earlier about too much emphasis on tourism. I think we have a balance here. It's like I said earlier about the quality of life. Tourism creates the need for cultural and recreational facilities. Because of that, we, all of us here sitting at this table, and our neighbors benefit, and our school children get to go on great field trips that people in other parts of the world that don't have such resources do not have. So we need both. We need to have the tourism sector because it will keep our eye on the prize, if you like, the beauty of the hillsides. We got to keep it nice, beautiful, make people want to come here, and at the same time there's no reason at all why we can't also have industry, as long as it's not belching black smoke into the air. I stand in the middle somewhere on the bypass issue. I don't live in Pittsfield, and I'm not involved in industry, so I can't get into that. But I do think that we do need to explore the whole transportation issue as well as the affordable housing. We have a lot of young people who really love it here. They grew up here. I have 2 daughters. They've both chosen to come back here after school and work. One in the social services, the health sector, and the other in the arts. So, you know, obviously in the right fields. But I just know how hard it's been for them to find good housing, inexpensive, and also if their cars break down and kids in their 20s do not have fancy 4-wheel drive, they can't get a bus regularly. The transportation system for the local people is not good, let alone from elsewhere. We need a better networking to the throughways, and I think, and this is a pet of mine, while we've still got railroad tracks, why don't we rehabilitate them and bring them back? Isn't it an economic way to move goods? Isn't it an economic way to move people? We used to bring tourists up here from New York and Boston on the railways. We don't do it anymore. They don't exist. There's a lot of areas that we need to be looking at. But as far as, who's going to have the vision, who's going to do it, this country, which is my adopted country, I live here by choice, and I am a citizen, in case you should wonder. I vote and I pay taxes. This country was not founded on people sitting around pussyfooting and saying, well, we better talk to someone. It was founded by radicals who jumped in and said, hey, let's do it. Let's get in there. And I think that if we really care and we want to keep the Berkshires green and we want to keep our people here so they have good jobs, not jobs that pay below minimum wage and rely on tips from sometimes, cheap visitors, we really do need to have somebody, maybe a few radical people. I mean, we need to have people just jump in and say, what the hell, let's try it. They'll get voted out of office if it doesn't work, or somebody will write a letter to the Eagle, but I just don't see that 60s or 1800s, jump in stuff right now. We're all discussing it too much.
There's another point, too, Lou, in terms of remaining competitive and having a quality environment. Quality schools are going to be absolutely essential. I think each of us as individuals within this community are going to have to bite the carrot in terms of helping to fund that situation and sending messages back to those elected officials, Gary, that we are willing and know the reasons for paying higher taxes if they get directed to the services that we need.
But to what end now, Diane? To what end? Do we want to create jobs in Berkshire County? The answer is yes, right? The answer to the obvious is yes. We saw recently, or at least I saw anyway, the best effort I have ever seen of a public-private partnership when we went forth and tried to bring in the Spalding plant from Gloversville, the Volvo effort. I mean, a lot of people, worked very hard to try and make that happen. It's the best damn effort I've seen in this county. And some of the people who worked on it are sitting right around this table. And I'm going to tell you something. We failed in both cases. I'm going to raise the question again. Why did we fail? Because Pittsfield is not just competing for jobs against other General Electric plants, Fred. That's one set of problems, and I appreciate that, and I understand that. But what he said, High Point is beating the brains out of Grand Rapids to get that kind of furniture business down at High Point. But do you think High Point got it by just simply strolling up there and say, hey guys, we want you to come down and try our neck of the woods. It's not too bad. We got some good trees down there and we can do some good things. I have to tell you, it doesn't happen that way. It simply doesn't happen that way. High Point is getting jobs because High Point as a city and as a state in the Carolinas has figured out how to be competitive against Grand Rapids. So when you target, as Tom was saying before, when you target the type of industry, the type of jobs that we think can fit our proportions here. You know what we say in golf, you don't want to have to swing outside of yourself. You got to stay within your capabilities. It's the same thing for Berkshire County. We have to stay within our capabilities, but we have to target the prospects that we think we can win with. That's a critical piece of information, I think, that we think we can win with. And then we have to have our legislators and our government give us the means, the real commitment to make us competitive. We failed in Gloversville because New York State was a damn sight more competitive than we were. And they figured out how to do it right. So if you want to be competitive, guys, you got to have some help from the state. And you got to ask your state legislators very specifically, how can we be more competitive and what can you do to help us? Now, if the guys say, like Fred says, we got a budget problem, we got to face reality, okay, then let's stop kidding ourselves and let's start working as best we can, as you are, to improve what we have here and get off this kick of how we're going to develop other industries in here. Because you're not going to. You have to be competitive. And the only way you're going to be competitive against other cities is to have the capability from the state legislature to say, we're going to make Berkshire County competitive.
Lou, I'd like to support
Yeah, let me,
what Gary's
Bob
saying.
wants to jump in here.
I want to support what Gary's saying, and it was too bad that we lost the Spalding in particular. The Spalding company would have been an excellent company here for Berkshire County. But I think what we've got to realize, and the legislators have to realize it also, that we are going to have to give something away. We're going to have to be willing, as Pittsfield did when KB Toys moved from Lee to Pittsfield. We're going to have to be willing to do that. And affordable housing has been mentioned. I looked at plans this week. There's a group that wants to do some affordable housing in Pittsfield, and we're very much behind it. And we're going to need more of that because jobs are the crucial part. The tourist industry is wonderful. I think it's great for us, and the cultural parts are wonderful. It makes it great. But the jobs are what we're going to need to build the vitality of Berkshire County.
As an elected official, I'd like to jump in here at some of the things that Gary has said, because I think we've got to look at the difference between the vision of what we're going to do as a county and the tools. And yes, I agree with Gary that the elected officials, and particularly the legislators, have got to give us the tools. Now, we just discovered down in Great Barrington recently that there's no provision in the state law to give an industry a tax break when they come in. You cannot discount taxes. Now that's something that has got to be remedied, because that's how High Point got people down from Grand Rapids. But as far as this vision goes, I think that has to be local. And I still come back to the Berkshire County Regional Planning Commission. And please don't think of the BCRPC as the staff. Everybody does. But the BCRPC is a commission. It's an association of local officials. And they are your local officials. And it is the only association, countywide association I know of local elected officials who can get together and plan goals for the county over through the 90s, if you will. And don't look to the county commissioners. County government, let's face it, is going to go the way of the dinosaurs. I think what we're looking at is these local officials, as Gary says, but in association through the BCRPC.
We've got about 2 minutes left. Anybody want to jump in as a wrap-up here? Tom?
I think listening to everyone, we see that there are some definite turf struggles going on within the community. You hear about, you know, health benefits, you hear about labor problems, you hear about how the community should work together. I think that in order to pull that focus together, I think the community has to reassess where it's going. I think that there are some job development coordinating council people working together today, working with state legislators toward those kind of goals, toward bringing jobs to Berkshire County. I think that the local chambers, okay, both in southern Berkshire, central Berkshire, and northern Berkshire need to work together toward that commonality goal, bringing jobs to Berkshire County, bringing new industry to Berkshire County. I think that people pulling together is the key to this whole program. I think that local government has to recognize, okay, and join that team or join those teams, okay, which can get things done. I think that they have to stop working on the outside and start working on the inside with the local business people toward getting those things accomplished. And if they don't get those things accomplished, then we need to replace them as officials and make people that are going to work with us, okay, supply the energy that's necessary and the dollars that are necessary from the state, okay, to get things done.
Tom, you really sort of summarized, I think, what a lot of people have touched on, that government and agencies are really too important to leave up to the politicians. That we're really talking about the people. We're talking about the labor union people. We're talking about the constituents in Great Barrington. But that government really is much too important to be left up to the politicians. We're out of time. I want to thank you all for participating in what I found, anyway, to be a highly stimulating discussion. I want to thank Channel 20 for making the technical facilities available, Garrett McCarty for directing the program, the Elder Services of Berkshire County for supplying the camera work, and really the Berkshire Eagle for allowing us all to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.